Hello everyone, I'm Damini and I'm sharing my first video with you all. Alyssa, after closing a big business deal with the Chinese, returned happily to the New York airport. Her ecstasy knew no bounds when she called her boyfriend Jones to tell the same. She whirled the steering wheel to a halt as she returned home from Beijing after a sprawling gap of 10 days. As she enters, the door screeches into the most enlivening facade, once which she had only dreamt of. Plush green lawns and gaudy meadows adjoining suede colored concrete made for a splendid sight to behold. She had few of the flashiest German cars in the world, a byproduct of her slogging for meticulous hours in office. Alyssa was draped in a beige overcoat that fell slightly shy of kissing her knees, and her tresses caressed her cheeks rhythmically with the air. With her head wrapped in a hand-woven silk scarf that she newly purchased from China, Alyssa walked briskly into the grandeur. She took a hot shower to ward off the travelling hues and helped herself with a hot cuppa in the bedroom. As Alyssa, before sipping her coffee, she breathed in the aroma of the Brazilian best. After all, she always prefers it to be mildly strong. As she takes another sip, Alyssa dwells on the dependence on globalization for everyday needs without anybody giving serious thought to it and without recourse. It is not just in retail consumptions of cars, coffee, and clothes that globalization exists, but we are dependent on it for our every goddamn need. For example, McDonald's makes money despite doing away with its traditional recipe of fries. Burger King, which is primarily known for its beef patty, lucratively in countries like India, where it has a vegetarian menu which is far from its trademark food. Globalization at its best, she pondered. As Alyssa brings the mug closer to her lips for taking another sip, she feels unease from within. Alyssa had been a frequent traveler owing to her hectic work schedules, but never had she felt fatigue this way. It felt like being short of breath after hours of endless sprinting. The coughing just won't go from the past 3 to 4 days. And Alyssa felt she should get it diagnosed immediately before the problems could magnify. So she grabbed her car keys from the dining table and left for the hospital. Alyssa was gasping for breath on the road amidst the plethora of cars that were honking horns incessantly. On reaching the hospital, she barged into the emergency ward and underwent diagnosis. After waiting for long, the results were finally out. Alyssa was COVID-19 positive. Not only that, she was one of the first victims to this novel coronavirus. Alyssa was reported to the isolated hall from the emergency ward and kept there for a fortnight. There were no flowers there, whose scent could be smelt profoundly, and sunshine barely pierced through the window pane during noon hours. The smell that could be only smelled of was of disinfectants and sanitizers. The only visits that were made were of the medical staff, which traumatized her with the insertion of swabs. As newer patients came by, there were makeshift cardboard demarcations made in the same hall. On day 11, Alyssa tested negative for the COVID-19 for the first time. She then persistently began protesting with doctors to discharge her. Doctors, on the other hand, didn't want Alyssa to be the fomite that could perhaps infect the remaining population. To Alyssa's horror, they waited for another negative before relieving her. On day 14, after testing negative for the second time, Alyssa drove back to home, but to her astonishment, the outside world had come to a grinding halt. There were barely 2 cars and 3 lorries in the 1.5 kilometer stretch back to home, and cool winds were blowing down the hills such that basking in the lawns sounded like a refreshing idea. And oh Jesus, the larking birds heralded the sky captivatingly. The hedgehogs were back in the public parks as the city lockdown had stopped the engine's wagon wheels. Situations were tensed and respite from the pandemic were nowhere near. Quarantine had become the order of the day, she had learned while glancing through a newspaper article, and there was severe economic collapse. International borders were sealed and domestic ones were under heavy checks. The multinationals were working from home and the international summits were being conducted via video conferencing. Travel restrictions also meant that the itineraries had to be charted out very efficiently. For example, lists of groceries had to be made such that whenever one got a chance to move out, there could be effective shopping done. Home deliveries were mostly out of service and home cooked meals therefore became a lifestyle. For many, work from home meant strengthening of family ties and binging, sleeping, working without splurging. It also meant having meals together in the balconies that were lit by stars in the night and blanketed by lovely breezes during the day. Sans severe pollution. It also meant beginnings for working out at home because gyms were mostly given a miss anyway after a tiring day from work. It also meant catching up with old friends digitally and watching the latest Netflix series. For India, latter however got replaced mostly by the Ramayana on Doordarshan. Alyssa too would be experimenting new recipes from Rogan Josh to shakshuka. The Italian porcelain were finally out of the cabinet to feast in. Alyssa would then sit down, get over with a few work assignments and again begin browsing her home. The antiques from Egypt, the spice box from India, the wind chimes that her boyfriend gifted her on Valentine's from Chicago, and the photo album that her family packed along with her clothes when she moved from Seattle. Globalization at its best, she pondered. Alyssa would wash her bed sheets with the lemon detergent that she bought for $10 from Walmart. She would then sleep in those sheets cozily, breathing in those aromas, and on waking up, she'd apply heaps of body lotion on her legs and arms till she smelled full of cocoa butter. And there were others who cringed at the thought of staying indoors for so long. They felt trapped and incarcerated. Their own kids, howling and crying, were a headache to them. They waited desperately for the lockdown norms to be lifted as arguments in the family had become more fierce and fiery. All in all, I think this virus brought a situation for all of us. The situation is more or less uniform because it doesn't discriminate between the rich and the poor. It didn't discriminate whether you lived in the Buckingham Palace or in shoddy huts. What mattered was your reaction. Did you help the needy, or did you shrug off your duties in pursuit of your protection from the virus? Did you utter mean words to your family and thought of them as a nuisance, or you thanked God for the space and time to relish with them? Did you look for this arena for self-development, or did you kill the time on phone and laptop all day? Last and not the least, we would like to unconditionally and heartily thank the entire medical staff, all the forces of our nation, and the people abiding by the quarantine norms. When the victory comes our way, which I'm sure it will, remember you all to pat your backs. I hope you liked the video.